Thank you. Thank you guys for coming. Thanks for that introduction. Yes, this is Producing for Cross-Platform, Why Do It, and How to Do It Successfully. SGN is a cross-platform gaming company. So hopefully some of these pearls of wisdom will be useful to you guys. So before we talk about the why and the how, I think it's important to talk about what cross-platform is. Cross-platform is a great buzzword. You hear it a lot these days. It's kind of thrown around. It sounds awesome to say we're cross-platform. But what does cross-platform really mean? So I think if you ask 100 people, you'll get 100 different answers. But for the purpose of this presentation, I'll tell you how we at SGN define a truly cross-platform game. First of all, it has to be across the three major platforms, iOS, Android, and Facebook Web. Your progress has to be synced across the three platforms. So for us, we make puzzle games that are level-based. So what that means is if I'm on level 23 on Facebook, and then I play the game on my phone, I'll also be on level 23 on my phone. It's the same core game experience regardless of the platform that you're playing on. And what I mean by that is it's the same core game loop. So if I'm having a conversation about one of our games, Panda Jam, with a friend who's playing on Facebook and I'm playing on my phone, we can have the same conversation and understand exactly what the game is about. The one thing that we think is important that changes across each platform in a great cross-platform game are usability tweaks depending on what platform you're on. So if you think about playing with a mouse on the computer versus the finger on a touch screen on a mobile phone, those are very different usability experiences. Same with a small screen on a phone and a big screen on a tablet or a computer. So we think it's really important that you optimize each individual device and platform for things that are specifically tailored to that platform while still keeping the core game experience the same across all of them. Okay, so why go cross-platform? For SGN, this is a big part of our strategy. You really have to know who your user base is. So for us, we make casual, broad games. Our most popular game right now is Cookie Jam. It's a match 3 game where you travel around the world as a French baker, crafting really delicious pastries through your matches. Our second most popular game is Panda Pop. It's a bubble shooter where you're trying to save baby pandas and return them to their mama panda. So these are very broad games, and as a result, we cover a wide swath of the population. Pink, blue, young, old. We skew a little pinker and a little older, but we're very, very broad. And so as a result, we have to understand who that player is. So a hardcore player like myself is not our typical user. I will say, okay, I'm going to spend 4 hours playing a game today, and then I'm going to schedule my social plans around that game session. For the most part, our players are not like that, and they're scheduling their lives and then fitting in the gameplay sessions around them. So it's incredibly important for us to be convenient for our players. So whenever they get the urge to play, wherever they are on whatever platform that they're near, they can just pick up an SGN game. So because of that, cross-platform is key. We talk about cross-promotion a lot at SGN. It's a big part of our strategy amongst different games in our network, but it's also really important amongst a single game within our network. So, for example, for user acquisition, if user acquisition is really expensive on one platform and you're able to be on multiple platforms with the same game, you can purchase those users on the less expensive platform and then use internal promotions and messaging to push them to the more expensive platform, yet another benefit of cross-platform. And then, it sounds crazy obvious, but it should be said, you can make money on 3 platforms instead of 1. And we all know that there's a lot of R&D, production, time, money that goes into the development of a really great game. So if you can make one game and put it out on multiple platforms, instead of making one game, putting it out on a platform and starting from scratch again, you're in a better place. But the truth is you're only in a better place if you can really save time, save money, and still make a great experience that your users are really going to like. Which brings us to the how. So how do we approach cross-platform? First of all, the most important thing that I can say is in an optimal world, you want to build once. So if you think about it like a movie studio, they're not shooting an entire movie for the theatrical release, then starting over again and shooting it again for TV and shooting it again for the DVD release. They shoot it once and then they put it on multiple platforms. We're aiming to do the same thing. So what does that mean? On the tech side, it means that we developed a proprietary technology called Master Key, which allows us to develop the main code base in one unified trunk and then add on native extensions for each of the platform at the end of development. Same principle aside goes for design, for game design, for art, for UI. Incredibly important to design once, but here's the tricky part. At the same time, these different elements need to be tailored for each platform. So the key here is knowing what you're going to do upfront. So we look at all the different platforms from day one of development. No matter which platform we're going to launch on first, we'll literally, from a design perspective, look at every screen that we're eventually going to launch on and make sure all of our art, all of our UI, all our game design works on all of the screens. And if there are things that need to be changed, that's okay from platform to platform. But as I'm sure you guys all know, much better to know these things in your production schedule ahead of time instead of at the end of the cycle. So we really try to account for all of this up front. A good example of this is, in the art. So let's say you're going Facebook first. There are some beautifully rendered game pieces that you have. They're gorgeous and they're detailed and they're on a big widescreen and they just look delicious and you want to eat them and they're fantastic. If you then, at the end of your process, say, okay, I'm now going to go to mobile, I'm just going to shrink them down and everything's going to be fine, those beautiful rendered pieces might lose all their detail and all their intrigue when you bring them to mobile. So again, you just want to make sure up front that you account for everything that you're going to be changing later on so it doesn't give you a hiccup in the development process. Releasing the game. So I don't think that there is a right or wrong platform to release on first. I'll tell you about how we do it. I think the main things that are important, though, are making sure that for an initial release, you can get data. And the key data that we look for are level tuning, how our levels are difficulty-wise, the FTUI, the first-time user experience, and the funnel for drop-off, at what point people are leaving the game in that experience. And then retention. We care very deeply about retention and how long people are playing the game for. So what we do is we do a soft launch on iOS first. We put it in low monetizing countries. Those are countries that, for us, monetize less well than some of our other countries. And we'll put it out to a few thousand people. And then we'll watch to get that analytics back about the levels, the FTUI, and the retention. And then we'll tweak. And then about a month later, we'll do a worldwide launch on iOS. And the reason that we start with iOS is because it's our best monetizing platform. So even though we want to tailor for every platform, and we do, the most important one to us is iOS from the start, so we want to make sure our initial learnings are on that platform. So then we launch on iOS, and then roughly about 2 weeks later, we'll launch on Android. And then about 2 to 3 weeks after that, we'll launch on Facebook. And I think the key here is if you can plan ahead, you can launch very quickly with each one if you're able to build the bulk of your code in one trunk. Oh, you know what? I didn't tell you guys about live game releases. So once the game is live, the fun part happens. We're really in games as a service. So after it's built once is when we really dig in. Our games, we like to call them evergreen. So our first original titles that we came out with a little over 2 years ago are still going strong on all 3 platforms. And that's because we're constantly updating them, constantly putting out new content, new features, optimizations, bug fixes, right? So how do we release all of those things across 3 separate platforms? It can be tricky, but this is what we do. Again, I think the key is making sure that they come out around the same time. So I just suggest you try whatever works best for your team and play around with it. But our experience is that the best case is we will start with iOS. So we send one build to QA that's iOS, Android, and Facebook. Our QA team starts attacking iOS. They get probably 80% of the way through. We feel pretty confident that we have a stable build, and we'll do what we call a preemptive submission to Apple. So we'll put it in the queue, which takes about a week, and then we'll continue QAing it, hoping that there are no additional bugs found. If there are not, we've saved ourselves a couple days. If there are, oh well, we pull it out of the store, we make the fixes, we put it back in. So what we do after we put the iOS build in the queue is we'll put out the Android version. Then we'll get learnings from the Android version, hopefully no bugs, but you never know. And if we get learnings based off of, again, our level data, our FATUI, our attention, we'll most likely be able to make changes to the levels server side, and then we'll push those changes while the iOS build is still in the queue. So again, we're just really trying to accomplish as much as possible while it's waiting in the queue. And then when it is released, we'll be ready with the Facebook build so we can release Facebook right then. So our goal, again, is to be convenient for our players. So we want to have as little time as humanly possible between each of the releases, so that if you're playing on level 50 on Facebook and the iOS build is not out yet, when you go to play level 50, that's inconvenient for you in a situation we try to have not happen as much as possible. Social. So I think a big key to cross-platform success is taking advantage of social features. So you're most likely going to use Facebook single sign-on to sync progress across different platforms. So as long as you have that, you should really take advantage of all of the retention and engagement features that you can take from having social in your game. So just a couple stats to show you how important we think social is. A player for us that is socially connected is worth roughly 3 times what a non-socially connected player is worth. A player who's socially connected has about 30% better retention than a non-socially connected player. And this is my favorite stat. A player who is socially connected and has at least one friend who they're socially connected to playing the game has 60% better retention on average in our games. And that's a huge number, and it makes a very big difference to us. So we focus heavily on making sure that we put reasons to be social throughout our game. So a summary of the how-to: build once from an engineering standpoint and a design standpoint as much as you possibly can to save yourself time, money, and headache. But remembering that if you are going to have differences from platform to platform, which is totally okay, account for them at the beginning of the production process. Release quickly. Hopefully your initial releases can be timed within a few weeks of each other so that people playing on all of your platforms can have access to the game at the same time. This can also really help with your marketing efforts if you have releases going on in a similar time frame. And then in the live game releases, making sure that you stay convenient for players all the time and keep convenience in your mind, making sure that your builds are as close to each other as they possibly can be across platforms. And then use social. It is beneficial. That's all I've got. Thank you very much for listening. Anyone have a question?
How you doing? My question was, I know you guys talked about having a proprietary gaming engine where you do everything and deploy it on multiple platforms. For those who don't have access to that kind of thing, what would you recommend they do in order to achieve the same results?
So we use a combination of this master key technology I was talking about, but we also employ some public programs like Starling. We use Starling as well to help us. That's one I'd recommend checking out. And I know that there are several off-the-shelf options for how to do this, so I recommend looking into that. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.